Hi there again, everybody. Boyd here with you, and welcome to part 2 of our 1/350 scale RMS Lusitania build. I've been working on these decks like I talked about when we left off in the last video. The plan was to come back and open up all these areas here so that we could allow light to get up to the very top of the model. And you can see that's what I've done here. It kind of looks like a canoe here from the upside down position. And it's all built black on the inside for being light blocked. So basically you have this area that I've kind of left right here to show you guys on the after deck. You can see this embossed area right here. I'll go ahead and tilt and zoom on that here for you a little bit, hopefully if I can. You guys can see that. But this little area right here is raised a little bit, so you have the walls, which are these pieces right here, that glue down on that and butt right against that. So I had to do that over this entire area, all three of these decks. And so working on that, I would start off with a little section of it. These are really long pieces and they're really, flimsy and frail. So I would, maybe about every inch or inch and a half, I would hold it in place and I would tack it with a little bit of CA glue and hit it with some zip kicker right away, so it kind of locked it in place, and I kind of stitched it together like that all the way through until I got everything locked down. And then I came back with some regular model glue and just laid a bead of that, over top of the whole thing to make it nice and solid. And all that was done from the inside here, because I opened this up enough where I could just get right down in there with my glue and everything and work on that. Now, I went back on all the window openings here, and I used this little dispenser here. It's kind of a little syringe, like a plastic syringe, and I just dipped this in some 560 canopy glue and just gently went in each one of these windows and just squeezed a little bit in there and let it dry. So we've got our kind of window in there. And the reason I like the 560 canopy glue is that it dries sort of opaque. It doesn't dry completely clear like micro crystal clear does, and that way we won't see any, when we move around and look at the model, we won't see any twinkling, that you typically get with LED lighting. That if you don't have it all, diffused properly, you'll see the individual LEDs, showing up too bright or too dim when you kind of move around and look at the model. So I've still got a few more of them that I've seen that I've missed. You can see as soon as you turn the lights on where you've missed them and everything, but that's no problem. These are all kind of open, and I can go back and get to those. So I'll be touching those up a little bit. But I'm getting really close to being able to, now that I've got this main assembly done here, I'm getting really close to be able to drop this down into the model now and glue it in place permanently. So I'm just going over everything and double checking everything, making sure everything's light blocked. And but by the end of the video here, we're going to glue this down in place, and we'll show you how the model looks with get zoomed back out here, with the upper deck put in place. And we'll have to go back and address a few light leaks around the edges of the decks and everything, I'm sure, where it meets the hull. But so I'm going to be leaving this area open here at the back because I can work on that from above. I can stack everything up on here and get it glued and everything. So I'm going to do that. But the main part of the ship here is done. You can see I've got the bridge put down. I'll just kind of show you some of the paint detail here on this. It's turned out really nice. Really starting to look like the Lusitania. And I just did a little bit of a wash here on the sides to get the, used a little bit of the Tamiya weathering wash here on the sides of the boat deck and everything. Painted the doors on the sides and all that, and a little bit of brown around the window frames, and got all that. Now, the fun part I had here was working on these skylights, because these are really nice parts that come with this kit that really look sharp when it's lit up too. You have this really nice little kind of crosshatch pattern on here where the glass has these little individual frames, and so I had to paint those. I didn't want to paint them by hand because your lines would get all jagged and everything, so I used some really narrow masking tape. I'll show you that little roll that I have right here. I have all kinds of different sizes of this stuff, and it comes in really handy. But it's just some of this little tape right here, and you can see how thin it is. And I just basically went on all these and made a crosshatch. I had to do one side at a time, kind of one line, then spray it, and then come back and crosshatch the other, and then spray it that way. And eventually it was all covered and light blocked and all that, so they look like individual windows that are lit up there, and it looks really sharp with the lights on. And you'll see it here in just a little bit, but I'm really, really happy with how that turned out. And I'm sure glad that they gave you clear parts with that, because doing that with white plastic would have been pretty difficult. But I'm just going over, tweaking a few things, doing a little paint touch-ups on it here and there. It's not completely done, but I'm really happy with how it looks so far. Up here at the front on the bridge, you've got these lower portholes right here. Those were done with fiber optics. I'm still going to put some more fiber optics in this little forward part right here. There's some more portholes. And then up here on these windows at the top of the bridge, I'm going to actually use some more of that 560 canopy glue the same way. I'll just go in here and start filling that in. And it may take a couple of applications because those are a little bit bigger, but those will eventually fill in. And then they'll be light blocked, or actually, you know, light. The light won't look so sourcey coming out of there. They'll look like there's actually some glass in there, but you won't be able to see completely into it. Now, I've done that by allowing light to come up from below. I didn't have to put any individual SMDs or anything in these upper decks like I had to do in some of the spots on that small Titanic model. And I wanted it to be that way. I wanted the bridge especially to be not quite so bright, especially up at the front part here, because they didn't really have powerful lights inside the bridge. You know, in the daytime, of course, they could see perfectly fine. And then at night, you don't want to have a lot of bright lights in your bridge or whatever because you can't see out what's out in front of you. So we want to have this area a little bit dimmer than the rest of the lighting on the ship. So kind of did that with that in mind. And so I think that about covers everything I've done on this so far, guys. What I'm going to be working on now, I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to be test fitting it on here on top a little bit more. And then I'm going to get it glued down in. And we'll come back and show you how that looks. And we'll talk about some of the issues that we're going to have to deal with from that point going forward. So that's a big step, though, guys. Once I get the main deck glued down on and in place and everything, it's really just a matter of putting on all the small detail parts after that. And we'll probably, maybe at the end here, we'll stick the funnels on it and show you a little bit of a mock-up, and you'll get an idea of how the ship is going to start looking overall. So I'm going to work on that, and I'll come back and show you how that turns out in just a few minutes, guys. Be right back. Well, hello again, everybody. Back with you after a couple of hours worth of work here, and I'm really happy to say that I got the upper deck all put down onto the hull, and I didn't have much of a problem at all. Just went in with a good solid bead of glue all the way around before I pushed it down in there, and it sealed up really good. I'm really happy with it. As I mentioned early on, I tested this before, and I didn't have. I wasn't too worried because it looked like it was going to fit pretty close. And up here on the forepeak, you can see we don't have any huge gaps or anything like that, or light leaks. You might see a few points of light coming through there, and these are little holes in the deck that we've got to glue some detail parts down on later. Those will all go away. The mast and some steam winches, some bollards, and some other details. And then same thing here at the stern. You can see around the fantail here, it all fit really tight and really close. The only gap that I have is this one right here, and it's kind of just a gap between the upper deck and the hull, and it's just a defect in the way the kit was made. If you try to squeeze it together and get rid of it, it makes the side of the hull look like it's, you know, tweaked in a little bit, so that's obviously not going to work. So later on I'll be working on fixing that. I'll just cut out a little small strip of sheet styrene and make a little wedge and put it down in there and get it mounted flush. A little bit of glue, a little bit of sanding, and then some putty, and then some paint, and we'll make that go away, guys. So that's no problem at all. It could have been a lot worse, but here I'm just going to kind of skim over the top of it for you now and show you the lighting we've got going on the upper decks. As I mentioned in the first part of the video, you can see we've got that beautiful grid work on those skylights, which is something I was really looking forward to when I built this model. I knew this ship had these beautiful lights up on the top, and I really wanted to make those pop, and I think it came out really nice. That extra work we did masking those made them turn out really clean. And then you notice the beautiful bright orange smokestacks, and I was kind of wondering how these were going to look before I put it together and painted it, because I knew that they were supposed to be painted this bright orange. Cunard used that color for several years on their ocean liners. It's called International Orange, and it was meant to be, you know, really kind of exciting and eye-popping, and this ship must have looked absolutely fantastic in person when they launched it in 1907, because there wasn't really anything like it before. Titanic was, you know, really the biggest ship of its time, but it wasn't really that revolutionary. White Star used a lot of kind of common, established, you know, things that they've been using a long time. White Star was more of a practical company, if you want to call it that. They just wanted to make the Titanic big and luxurious, but they used the old steam reciprocating engines, where the Mauretania and Lusitania had turbine engines, which were a lot more powerful. They weren't as fuel efficient, but they were really powerful, so it made them the fastest ships in the world for several years. Both the Lusitania and the Mauretania held the blue ribbon for transatlantic speed records for several years. And I think later on maybe the Aquitania, which was the third slightly larger sister to these two ships. The Mauritania and Lusitania came along. But I'll tell you a lot more history that I've found out about this when we get towards the final reveal. But just wanted to show you that everything turned out really good, guys. A couple hours worth of work. Here you can see I've got the bridge mounted on there now, and everything's been detail painted. I did a little bit of a wash on the upper decks, on the walls there, and I added the brown details around the windows. And if you look inside the kind of cladding here, I call this, along the sides, you can see that we've got those cabins back behind those all lit up really nice. I went in there with the micro crystal clear and made sure I touched all those up and we didn't have any light leaks coming out of there. And they're looking really good. But we'll swing around to the front here and show you the front part of the bridge. And you can see that this part right here, these upper windows of the bridge itself, they were completely open before, and you could see all the way down into the model. You could see the wiring and everything. And like I mentioned, I filled those up with crystal clear, let them dry, and they worked out really nice. We got a lot of, nice diffused light coming out of there now, and they're not leaking anymore. You can't see it, all the way through it. And it diffused and made the light quite a bit dimmer. If I put my hand over it, maybe you can see. I wanted that on purpose, not to be as bright as the some of the lighting on the rest of the ship, because, like I mentioned, they didn't have a lot of lights in the bridge. They wanted to see really good out of it at night, and during the daytime, obviously, you don't need it. So the rest of the ship was all for the passengers, and they had normal lighting in there, so that's kind of what we went with. But so just little things here and there. I've even got the navigation lights worked in. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it, but right here I've got the little red one, and on the other side I've got the green. I had to take a guess as far as where those are supposed to be on this ship. I couldn't really find any pictures of it, but I assumed, kind of like the Titanic, they'd be right near the bridge wings like that, so that's what I went with. And again, that's just a little bit of fiber optic pushed in there, and then some, to me, a transparent red on one and transparent green on the other on the tip of the fiber optic, and it looks really good. So, okay guys, well that's going to be a wrap pretty much for this update. The next video we're going to come back here and work on the after deck. I've just got this piece laying on here right now, so it covers up this huge open area with really blinding light coming out of it. I'm going to be working on the same thing I did the last time here, stacking up the decks. There's just 2 levels of decking that need to go with the cabin walls, and then you finish off on the top. You can see we've got the upper deck here, which has 2 more of these square areas I got to open up the center of so we can put the skylights on top of those, and then they stack up kind of like this. And then we have some more of this cladding that goes around the sides here that needs to go around that whole perimeter and all that. And that's the one thing I'll mention that was the most tedious on the build so far, was working with that. It's really thin, really flimsy, and it has to go on after the deck is put down. If you try to glue it on before you put the deck down, I found out it might not line up right, so you don't want to do that. So but like I said, you've got to be really careful with it. It's super brittle, and just take your time, if you get one of these old kits and work with it. Some of the really small fine detail parts, if you need to heat it because it's curved a little bit or warped, don't use a heat gun on that, because these little legs or whatever will immediately shrivel up on you. So if you do have to do that, get a pan of some kind that's big enough, and get some water heated up on your stove or whatever, and not totally boiling obviously, but nice and warm, and then dip the part in there and let it sit, and it'll soften up just the right amount where you can start working with it. And as soon as you pull it out of there and dip it in some cool, when you get it straightened out, dip it in some cool water, and it'll immediately lock into place where you left it. Just a lot of guys that have had to work with these old kits that are warped and everything have learned that, and works a lot better than using a heat gun in that particular case. But so there she is, guys, looking really good. I'm really happy with it so far. Just a few little touch-ups on it here and there, but overall it's looking pretty nice. I'm really happy for being a vintage kit like this, that it's coming out so well. So we'll be back in a few more days with another update on it. Until then, guys, take care, and happy modeling, everybody.